The Lady Vols look pretty darn good once again. Now, the first was in an exhibition game. This one counts. What do you think of the Lady Vols and their penchant for scoring a whole lot of points?
And we mean a whole lot of points. It's not the points they score, Dave. It's how they score them. Tennessee, yesterday was the first game of the Kim Caldwell era. And they set a school record for steals in a game. In the first game of the Kim Caldwell era. Dave, how long was Pat Summitt coach Tennessee?
Oh, gosh. Was it 27 years?
38 years.
38. Oops.
Won 8 national titles, loaded up the WNBA with talent, had like maybe 5 of the most talented teams of all time. She never had a team ever generate 27 steals in a game. Tennessee had 27 steals in a game and forced 37 turnovers. They played up-tempo all night. Talasia Cooper had 7 steals, which is an insane number on its own. Kenaya Boyd had 4 steals off the bench. Z Spearman had 2 steals. Sarah Puckett had 4 steals. Ruby Whitehorn had 3 steals. Jules Spear had 4 steals. This team is, look, I don't know how good they're going to be. Actually, they beat Samford 101-53, but they're going to turn up the tempo a lot. And by the way, some of the concerns surrounding them, including 3-point shooting, are issues. Sarah Puckett was 0-4 from 3. They were only 10 of 34 from 3 on the night, and they still managed to drop 101 points because they scored so many points in transition. I mean, their leading scorer was Z Spearman. She only hit 1 3, but she had 25 points because she had 2 steals, and she was the beneficiary of a lot of plays and buckets in transition. Same with Talasia Cooper, who didn't even have a 3, but scored 19 points, was second on the team in scoring because she had 7 steals and was just dominant in transition. I mean, look, there's a lot to say about this Lady Vols team. They're going to be one of the most fun team. They're going to be, I'll say this, they're going to be the most fun basketball team at Tennessee to watch this year.
Okay, let me set up a poll question here. Which or who are you most excited about? Is it men's hoops or women's hoops? So which do you think Tennessee fans should be most excited about?
I think in terms of production, men's hoops, I think men's hoops will get it together and it's still going to be a very, very strong force in the NCAA tournament. I don't know how far women's hoops can go this year, but if you are looking to be entertained, you should be more excited about women's hoops because they are going to be one of the most entertaining things you have seen in a long time. I'll just say, I think it's going to bring fans back to Thompson Bowling for the Lady Vols like you've never seen before, because this is just such an amazing style of play to watch. It is. Danny White understood the assignment and understood that hiring is about marketing, because this was a marketing move. I still don't know how good they're going to be. They haven't played anybody good, but they will be fun to watch. I can just say that.
Go ahead and click that like and subscribe button if you want to take part in the poll question. Do so right now. And it is this: what are you more excited about, men's hoops or women's hoops? Women's hoops with an early lead, 62% to 38%. Men's hoops, and I know they made the Elite Eight last year, but until Rick Barnes shows me consistently that he's changed his approach like he did last year, and we think he did in the first game this year, right?
Yes.
Until I see that consistently, I'm always going to think at best he's going to make the Final Four, and he probably won't do that. That sounds awful to say, and I know they ran into Zach Edey, who was the 2-time player of the year, and that's an unusual circumstance. But, Caleb, I just can't get past my head that Rick Barnes is going to be like Marv Levy. He's going to be one of the greatest coaches to never win a championship. And if that's the case, it's hard to get excited. Kim Caldwell, and the fact that he's 70, so how many more years does he have? Kim Caldwell is young, has an exciting brand of basketball. I also got super excited about watching Dalton Connect. I mean, I went to a game as a fan, which I rarely do, just to watch him play. So, I mean, I gotta disagree with you. I think the women's program is more exciting in this particular year for a number of reasons than the men's program.
I think that you're overestimating age and underestimating the future of Tennessee basketball under Rick Barnes. I think Rick Barnes, as I've said, is uniquely equipped for this era with NIL and the transfer portal to get certain players he wants. So I've said for a while, Rick Barnes is 70. There are 45-year-old coaches hired right now who will retire before him. That's
there's some truth to that.
Yeah, because I think Rick Barnes could go another 10 years, honestly. He looks in great shape. He's very religious to the point where I think he's got like a Zen-like feel about him where he's not like worried about aging. I honestly look, Dave, I'll just say this. I'm not so sure he drinks. I don't think he does. So I think he's in very, very good shape and very healthy. I think he's that type of guy that could coach until he's like 85 and have all of his wits about him and all of his energy about him. So, look, I think Rick Barnes has a long time ahead of him. And look, if you look at history of sports and coaching hires, if I say he has 10 years ahead of him, Dave, if I told you right now you could get 10 years out of a really, really good coach in any sport, that's what you want when you hire a coach, right? Most of them, you don't even get 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, you're at the point where if Kevin Durant has a son, maybe you get him. Rick Terry Jewelry Design, they want to be your jeweler looking for affordable game day jewelry, a Tennessee tradition. RickTerryJewelry.com. Again, RickTerryJewelry.com. I know how getting over 70 can be, and things can go wrong all of the sudden. That would be my one concern, Caleb. And when those things start to happen, they can go downhill quickly. I'm not saying that's going to happen with Rick Barnes. I agree with everything you said. I think his one vice is hot dogs. And I know he loves Griffin's Hot Dogs in Chattanooga. Like, he's a huge fan of that little Griffin's Hot Dogs place. So, I mean, he looks incredibly healthy. It looks like he can continue to do it. But we've all seen guys that have just up and said, this is a little bit too much. Now, to your point, I will say this. He looks like he's very comfortable with the transfer portal and the NIL. Had he not been, and I'll be honest with you, before that came along, I would have said Josh Heupel can handle this, Rod Delmonico can handle this, but man, I got a feeling Rick Barnes is going to hate this. Wouldn't you have before you've seen now Rick Barnes handle it? And he's handled it very well, very daftly for somebody that's 70 or 35.
I actually think what Rick Barnes has done, I think it helps him better because Rick Barnes, more than anybody, likes coaching or recruiting or anything like that. So I think with NIL and the transfer portal, he probably has what you would call a general manager scouting the 4-year guys that would take a last year at Tennessee to develop and bringing them in. And he's like, I just want to coach them. I honestly think that. I think that's why he embraces it. You see a lot of coaches who, can I tell you my most triggering thing about when a coach is hired, Dave?
Triggering thing?
Yes.
I'll tell you mine. Mine is when they hire the good-looking coach.
Okay. Mine is when you sell their ability to recruit over anything else. Because there are so many factors in recruiting. Derek Dooley was hired because he was the recruiting coordinator for LSU's national championship team under Nick Saban. Jeremy Pruitt was hired, and the first thing they said was great recruiter. Your resume and your scheme are more important than your recruiting because oftentimes schools recruit themselves. Rick Barnes, as a recruiter, he has proven to be a great recruiter in the past. I think it's because of his resume. I think now he doesn't have to focus on recruiting as much because he can just have another assistant say, find me a 4-year guy that wants to finish his last year at Tennessee. I'll make him a great player and we can have a great team with it. And I think Sir Rick Barnes loves this because of that, because he can spend more time coaching. It actually puts less work on him. Now, as far as getting back to Kim Caldwell, we don't know where she is on the recruiting side of things. But she went straight for the transfer portal to upgrade her roster immediately too this year. Her whole team is basically transfer portal people. So we'll have to see what happens with her. But look, I think here's why I'm more excited about Rick Barnes and Kim Caldwell. I'll put it this way. I'm not so sure Kim Caldwell's style doesn't have a ceiling in women's basketball. Yeah, up-tempo, frenetic pace is great, but Dave, I'll just put this out there. If it's like the Bruce Pearl of women's basketball, I mean, Bruce Pearl doesn't have a national title.
He did make the Final Four, though.
He made one Final Four, but he's got 0 national titles. And I think because the reason is, I think the talent still, it's like football. You can have the great offensive scheme, but when it comes down to it, the team with the talent wins off Jimmys and Joes and is usually defensive oriented. Same kind of with women's basketball. I mean, all the rage of Caitlin Clark last year, and she's an amazing player and deserved Rookie of the Year, and she's going to be one of the best in the WNBA. But what happened when Iowa faced South Carolina, which was loaded with talent, and South Carolina said, we're going to slow it down and just give it to our bigs? Iowa could do nothing in the women's basketball national championship game. How am I think Rick Barnes could actually put together a team that could win off talent like that, that's just coached well and doesn't need a system. Can Kim Caldwell go beyond just running an exciting system with the Lady Vols?
Do me a favor. What are realistic expectations for Kim Caldwell this year?
I make the NCAA tournament. I'll even say make the second round of the NCAA tournament. Make the round of 32.
Okay, within 3 years, what are realistic expectations? That would be theoretically all of her own players, right?
Yes.
Going into the third year.
I think with women's basketball, it's fair to expect an Elite Eight run within 3 years.
Okay. Within 5.
At least one Final Four run. I'm not going to say national championship nowadays because women's basketball is not what it was. There's a little bit of luck involved in winning a national title in women's basketball too now. I mean, Gino Auriemma hasn't won a national title in 8 years, and he's been running the most successful program since Pat Summitt's tragic illness. So it's hard for me to say, looking at that, just being the best program turns into winning a national title. Women's basketball has enough parity now to where, like football and like men's basketball, there's a little bit of luck that has to be involved.
No, I think that's true. And I think that Tennessee they've been the more dominant team in their national championship runs, clearly. And really, for a lot of those years, it just took one player to be special. Now, you mentioned South Carolina. How deep did they go? I mean, they were 8 solid players deep. And I know Tennessee had the Meeks, but after the Meeks, there was a little bit of a fall off. And after that group, there was a little bit of a fall off. And let's face it, Candace Parker could almost win a championship for you on her own. And what was the big tall girl at UConn? I can't remember her name. She could almost win a championship for you on her own. Maya Moore would have to be included in that group. Bridget Gordon would have to be included in that group. Those players don't exist anymore because the game's gotten so much more deep.
Yeah, but South Carolina is still playing that style too. But you're right for the most part. South Carolina is playing that style because and can get away with it. But I on principle, I actually do agree with you. I think you need more skill. And South Carolina 2 years ago choked against Iowa and Caitlin Clark. So I think that I think you're right. You can't just, it used to be you land 1-star recruit, you're winning the next 2 or 3 national titles. Is that fair to say, Dave?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't think that's going to be the case anymore in women's basketball. South Carolina didn't just have one player last year. They had a whole starting 5. Cardoso was their star, but they could go 5 to 8 deep with anybody scoring double figures, I mean. And so I think that what will Kim Caldwell do when she gets better players? For instance, we're seeing this with Josh Heupel. What has Josh Heupel done, Dave, this year? He ran a tempo-based offense his whole tenure as a head coach. It was all about the scheme, but then he got some Jimmys and Joes on defense, and he's kind of decided, let me adjust and win with Jimmys and Joes, hadn't he?
Yeah.
And can Kim Caldwell do that when she starts to get the players?
Well, I mean, don't we have the same question about Kim Caldwell that we would have about Josh Heupel? I mean, do we know that she can recruit against the Dawn Staleys of the world, against I know he's not where he was previously, but the Genos of the world? I mean, do we know that?
Again, the ability to recruit's overrated to me. I think you have to show you can have success early, and then the recruits will come. Particularly at a place like Tennessee and women's basketball. Let's be honest. The Lady Vols program recruits itself more than any program in women's basketball, if you have the right coach. I'm very, maybe, and you covered recruiting, maybe you see it differently than me, but I don't know many coaches that overcame substantive issues they had with scheming because they just out recruited other coaches. I just don't find that to be that common. I think when they do out recruit, it has to do with the program more than anything else. You can call Nick Saban a great recruiter. I can say that he took the LSU job just as LSU was willing to spend money and become a legitimate program in the state of Louisiana and won a national title with Louisiana kids, and that gave him all the credibility. I mean, did he just out recruit people at Alabama, or did he have the resume?
I thought Nick Saban out recruited people at Alabama and had the resume.
But could he have done it without the resume?
Well, he did it at LSU without the resume.
Yeah, but all he had to do was lock off the state of Louisiana. LSU was spending a lot of, you know this, Dave. Before 2000, before Mark Emmert took over, LSU was a joke of a program in what they put into the program, right?
Yes.
And
they spent more money on Mike the Tiger's cage, literally, than they did their own player facilities.
Exactly. And they upgraded those just as Nick Saban arrived. So would you say Nick Saban just recruited the state of Louisiana, or would you say LSU recruited the state of Louisiana by finally being a competent school?
No, I would say that.